Welcome everyone. I have completed two series of lectures, one which was introducing economics to undergraduates who hadn't really studied the subject before. A second series was an introduction to banking and finance for graduates completing those degrees. After that, I'm doing a few miscellaneous or occasional lectures on things that people have asked me if I could develop more points about. I completed one which was a little bit to do with politics and economics, and this is the second miscellaneous lecture where I have been asked to look at the tax system with one particular target in mind, and that is I explain a lot about the importance of what's called a reverse income tax. So the bulk of this talk will be explaining the reverse income tax. The title of the original lecture that I gave was Creating a Much More Efficient and Caring Tax and Welfare System in the UK, but it would apply to any country in the world. And quite a lot of people don't quite grasp this, so I've had quite a lot of discussions about it. So I'm going to go through it fairly carefully with a calculation, so hopefully you can take your time and really absorb and understand this particular system. But before that, I'm going to go through just a few other points of interest regarding the tax system, which I may well develop in further lectures. So I'm going to look at things which are quite current. Do we need to tax income, or do we need to tax wealth, or do we need to tax both? So a quick look at that. Should we have local taxes as well as national taxes? I'll take a look at that. What should the balance of tax be between taxing people's income and taxing their spending? I'm then just going to deal briefly with an issue that causes an enormous amount of confusion, which is the difference between the tax rate and the tax take, with help from Arthur Laffer and the Laffer curve. And then I'll spend a little more time explaining to you the tax system that we can use to manage welfare. So I'll just brief look at each of those before I get on to reverse income tax. So should we tax income or wealth or both? We need to understand exactly what is meant by income and wealth in this context before we can decide whether or not we're going to tax it. Income is anything that's received by the productive factors when you employ the productive factors. So land receives rent, that's an income. Labour receives wages, that's an income. Capital receives interest, that's an income. And enterprise receives profits, that's an income. So those are what you're thinking about when you're thinking of taxing income or incomes, which of those do you tax and at what rate, etc. Wealth, however, is just what you own. It's no more than that. It adds up all the things that you as a country, you as a company, you as an individual own. So you can all add up your own wealth, and you can do that by thinking of the exchange value of everything that you've got, and then you've got an idea of what your wealth is. And as you would expect, old people are much wealthier than young people because they've been accumulating things, owning things for a much longer period of time. Now, we also need to remember that capital in economics is a produced means of production. So capital, the produced means of production that allow you to produce more things. So a factory and machines would be capital because you don't consume them. You use them to produce things that you would consume. And all capital is part of the nation's wealth, but not all the nation's wealth is capital. Just owning things which you're never going to use to derive income means you have wealth, but you don't have capital. Capital is using whatever you own to receive an income. So all capital is wealth, but not all wealth is capital. The simple answer from me is no, don't tax wealth. It's absolutely pointless taxing wealth, and I'm sorry, I'm going to disagree with lots of people who think that there's a mythical wealthy group of people out there who if we take some of their wealth away from them, it will pay for all of the things that we need to be done in the economy. That's just not the case. People who are wealthy have got lots of responsibility. I would not want to live in a castle. Think of the heating bills, think of the amount of maintenance that you'd have to do. So those people who live in nice big castles, well, jolly good on them. They've got a lot of responsibility. I don't want to take away any of that wealth. If they're using their wealth to derive incomes, then that's different. I'm quite happy to tax their incomes from their wealth, which will be that component of their wealth which is capital, but I'm not bothered about how wealthy they are. It's pointless trying to do that. An analogy just to try and make that clear to you why it's pointless thinking about taxing wealth is if you think of wealth as just a lake of water, that's wealth. And if you take some wealth away, you drain that, the water level falls and gradually it's gone. If you think of income as a river flowing by, you can take some water away, you can take some tax out of it, there's always more coming behind. And if you don't take too much out of it, so whatever's coming behind continues to fill the river at the right level, then you've got a sustainable form of taxation. So why bother with trying to tax and reduce people's wealth? Because you destroy the tax source. Just tax any income received from wealth, and indeed any income received from all of the other productive activities that I described right at the start. Now, do we then bother about the uneven distribution of wealth because that offends lots of people, doesn't it? And they come out with these statistics that 1% of the population own 80% of its wealth and so on. All of these things again are totally unimportant and totally irrelevant. I'm not concerned at all about the uneven distribution of wealth, and I'm not concerned from the point of view you can do nothing about it at the end of the day. So why bother with that uneven distribution? I would just leave it as uneven as it is, but I would concentrate on redistributing income, and indeed that is exactly what has happened. The very uneven distribution of wealth is nothing like the distribution of income. The distribution of people's personal distribution of income is very narrow. It's much more even than wealth, and it often leads to economists who are not thinking, or sociologists are very good at this. They'll go 1% of the population owns 80%, did I say last time? Let's say the same again. 80% of the wealth of the country. Therefore, we have got to increase taxation on income, a non sequitur. If you want to make wealth more even, you tax wealth. If you want to make income more even, you tax income, but don't use the argument of an uneven distribution of wealth to try and redistribute income. Look at income if you want to redistribute it or redistribute it further. So tax income, not wealth. Make sure you don't take too much out of the river, because you want the tax to be sustainable, and I would just ignore wealth inequality. It's a mythical thing that we often use to imagine that there's someone out there who can pay for all the things we want, but it is just a myth, so don't worry about that. Do we have local taxes or national taxes? Yes, both. And the reason for both is I've explained in other lectures, so just very quickly, that there is something government must do, and that's provide the public good. That's the collective consumption good. That's the thing that we all want, like street lighting and roads, law and order. We all want these things, but because they're non-rival and non-excludable in their characteristics, we won't buy them. We need government to do that. And we can think of government supporting merit goods, which I've explained before, the support for education and health, two particular merit goods, which would be very much underconsumed if there was a market price for these products, and society benefits from encouraging more people to be healthy and to be educated. So if we're looking at, say, street lighting, local roads, and even schools, they could be financed totally or partially locally. And if they are financed locally, often people can see quite clearly where their tax is going. There are other things that have to be financed nationally. You know, a motorway going through your town, it would be not for local taxpayers to finance that. That's a national tax. An airport, national taxation spending. Now the NHS as well, there's a good argument, I'll have to do this in another lecture, but there's a good argument for financing the National Health Service through national taxation, but financing education through local taxation, I'll tell you why another day. So, although I've said there's no reason for a wealth tax, I should add to that, there's no reason for having a nationwide wealth tax, which is attempting to reduce people's wealth, but I have some support for a local wealth tax based upon property values, you know, council tax, the rates, whatever you want to call it. There's an argument for that type of tax to finance local authorities. Again, I would want my local authorities to run balanced budgets, and I would want them to be limited and disciplined in that way, and that's the same as I would for a national government, as I have explained before, and not everyone will have agreed. But yes, to finance the public and merit good provision, some local taxation is very useful, some national taxation, yes. So do we have local taxes and national taxes? The answer to that one is a yes, we do have that. Now, what's the balance of taxes on income and spending? Spending taxes are regressive. Now, regressive taxes are not what most people think they are. If I ask my students, do rich people pay more, less, or the same amount when taxation is regressive, 99% of them will say they pay less. Of course they don't. Rich people pay more under a regressive tax system. The regressive nature of the tax is the proportion of their income they pay in tax. So rich people will pay more tax, but they will pay proportionately less of their total income in tax when the tax is regressive. That means if a poor person and a rich person buy the same thing and pay a 15% VAT on whatever it is they've bought, the amount of tax that the poor person pays will be a bigger proportion of their income. The amount of tax the rich person pays will be a smaller proportion of their income. That's why spending taxes are regressive. Now, I've said in other lectures I would like to have two spending taxes. I would like an ad valorem tax, you know, VAT, and I would like excise duties, because alongside the merit goods we've described, like education and health, there are demerit goods. There are alcohol, smoking, gambling. There are goods which will be overconsumed if we just charged the market price. So I can see adding a little bit extra onto the spending tax to discourage those habits to a point at which they might damage society. So I do like my excise duty, which I can add on, say, to cigarettes, to alcohol, and try and reduce consumption of those things. And as I've said before, it would be a source of funds to help finance the merit goods that I'm going to support. So to compensate for the fact that our spending taxes are regressive, I'm quite happy to have a mild progression on income tax. And in fact, what I would suggest is 3 bands of income tax. One will be the reverse band that I will explain in more detail in a moment. And then I would have 1 step of progression. And I'm not talking about any particular rates, but all that means is that perhaps when your income lies between £20,000 and £40,000, you'll pay 20p in the pound, and when it lies above £40,000, you'll pay 30p in the pound at the margin. But I'm not specifying what the rate should be, but that's what I mean by 3 bands of income tax, 1 reverse, and then just 1 step up from the basic taxation at some point when a person's income increases. So I'm not all for spending taxes, as some tax havens are. I'm not all for income taxes. There is definitely a good argument for a balance of spending taxes and income taxes. And one of the important points, because spending taxes are regressive, is to have a mild progression in the income taxes. Now, the next thing that I need to explain to you is the difference between tax rate and tax take. And this is very important, and something in politics which is it's always talked about, that if we want to increase the tax take, all we've got to do is increase the tax rate. So the calculations are always made, we need more money for this, we need more money for that. All we've got to do is raise income tax by 1p, or we've got to put an excise duty on something, or we've got to raise VAT from 15 to 20%, whatever it is, on the assumption that that will have no effect upon people's work habits and their spending habits, and therefore the change in the tax rate will automatically change the tax rate. The tax take. That's wrong, as Arthur Laffer explained in his Laffer curve, which we can just take a look at before I say any more about it. This is the Laffer curve, and it's a curve based upon what would happen to tax take on the vertical axis as you increase tax rate on the horizontal axis, and the red line is the curve, and the curve starts at 0 in terms of tax take and finishes at 0 in terms of tax take. That is, if you had a 0 tax rate, you wouldn't get any tax take. If you had 100% tax rate, you wouldn't get any tax either, because all of those people giving you all of their income would just die off very quickly, and so you would get 0% tax take at both ends, which means somewhere in between that there is an optimum tax rate which will give you the highest tax take. Now, we don't know what that is in practice, but it certainly must be there in theory, because you've got a tax rate as it rises that is associated with a tax take, and we know it starts at 0 and goes to 0, so somewhere in the middle there must be an optimum tax rate. Now, if I ask my students, what do you think the highest income tax rate at the margin was during the 1970s, they'll start usually around 40, and I'll ease them upwards through 50, through 60, through 70, through 80, through 90. It was actually 98%. That is, you paid at the margin as a high income earner 98p in the pound as tax. Now that was actually 83p income tax and a 15% surcharge if it was unearned income or income from shares or interest or some other source. How did that ever happen? Well, it happened because it's good politics. It's good politics to keep putting up the income tax rate because as long as you put the income tax rate up at the top end, it doesn't affect many people, so there's lots of votes in it, and it creates again this illusion. There's this myth of very rich people who will pay for everything, and they deserve to pay because they've got higher incomes, so tax rates go up and up and up because politically it's a very good thing. But of course it doesn't make you more revenue. The tax take falls, and in fact these high marginal rates of taxation in the 70s cost more to manage than you ever received in the form of tax, because anyone who might have received these very high incomes, and they would have their income paid abroad. They go and live abroad. It's no coincidence that lots of motor racing drivers live in Monaco, and lots of rock stars live in other countries other than the UK, because they could earn their money abroad and keep it abroad and not bring it back where it was liable to 98% income tax. And because both the Labour Party and the Tory Party in the UK had sort of been pushing income tax rates up, we were well down here, this side, and this was great news. Not sure they realised it immediately, but they soon realised it for Margaret Thatcher and Ronald Reagan in America, because here you've got a double whammy in political terms. Now, what does this double whammy mean? It means I can reduce the tax rate and increase the tax take. Both great, reducing the tax rate, more votes in doing that, more income coming in, more to spend, more votes in doing that. So it really was, for a period of time, a great thing for Margaret Thatcher and Ronald Reagan to reduce income tax rates because they were getting more tax take. Now, Ronald Reagan, who did actually major in economics and sociology as well, I think, so perhaps that's the explanation, didn't quite grasp the fact that as you were moving back up here, there comes a point where you're going to start going back down again. And Reagan, as governor of California, was always keen to lower tax rates because he got more tax coming in. And when he became president, he did that. And he always thought, we've got to spend more money on this, so let's lower taxes. More money on this, let's lower taxes. And as soon as we come down here, of course, government spending goes up, the tax take goes down. And so you have a president who, during his term of office, calls the yearly borrowing requirement to grow very rapidly in the US. Margaret Thatcher, a grocer's daughter, a little bit more careful, so it didn't happen over here, but it did create, as I say, that double whammy where you can, over a range, reduce tax rates and get more revenue coming in. Now, another thing I often say to my students is I'm not a great fan of corporation tax. So I tell them that I could reduce corporation tax to 0 and that will increase tax take enormously. How do you do that? They'll say, a little bit of thought required. Simple. If you're the country that reduces corporation tax to 0, you will attract companies to locate in your country, to employ people in your country, to raise incomes in your country. So a 0 corporation tax will increase other incomes that will be taxed, and I'm absolutely certain that a 0 corporation tax will be a real benefit for tax take. And it's also a very useful thing to do, because we all know that the economies now are actually lots of the companies, international companies around the world, are big companies in every economy, and they can avoid paying corporation tax. a tax on the profits of the company just by shifting resources around the world. So by reducing corporation tax, you take away a problem. The problem is that any companies which are just UK based cannot get out of paying tax. So they're at a disadvantage. International companies can get out of paying tax. So we all know the numbers, don't we? How much Amazon pay, how much Apple pay. It's negligible. It's nothing. So if we wanted fairness in the system and we wanted all UK companies to be treated fairly, then I go straight down to zero for corporation tax. And not only will we benefit all UK companies, we will reduce the amount of tax avoidance, tax evasion associated with corporation tax, and at the same time increase the tax take in the UK economy. So hopefully you now understand the difference between tax rate and tax take. Let me then look at the main thing that I'm going to talk about for the rest of this lecture, which is reverse income tax. It's the same as Milton Friedman's negative income tax. No idea who called it reverse income tax, but I prefer reverse income tax to negative income tax, so I will refer to it in that way from now on, because reverse income tax, brilliant. It could effectively and efficiently replace welfare benefits, state pensions. It could offer students grants. It can eliminate poverty. It can create an incentive to work, and it can provide a minimum standard for a universal basic income. It can do all those things much more efficiently than the system that we have in place at the moment. Now, what are the advantages of having reverse income tax before I go through a calculation of how it's done? Reverse income tax actually puts money in people's pockets, so you can argue that it helps poor people in the most direct way by giving them money. It treats people with more respect. It treats people as responsible adults rather than wards of the state. Responsible adults because here's the money, you choose how you spend it. It isn't come to me if you want this and I'll provide it for you, or I'll buy it for you, or here's a voucher which will allow you to get it. It isn't that sort of monitoring of how people spend their money. It's just a simple transfer of income to poor people, and if they want to go out and spend it all on alcohol and drugs, well, they'd be entitled to do that. But of course we wouldn't expect that to be the case for everyone, although it might happen with one or two people. So it helps poor in the most direct way, and it treats people as if they are responsible adults. Even though they are poor, they are still responsible adults. And I'm going to explain in more detail. It actually creates an incentive to work. There are a lot of people who come in on this argument and go, you're removing the incentive to work. The welfare system as it is at the moment removes the incentive to work. RIT, reverse income tax, gives that incentive back to the economy. It creates an incentive to work. I'll explain why in just a moment. It'll cost a lot less than the current welfare program, a lot less than the current welfare program. So if you're just measuring efficiency, then it's by far and away a winner. It's all managed through the tax system. So HMRC, sorry, Her Majesty's Revenue and Customs, they'll do it all. So we won't have any departments, any government departments concerned with welfare programs, except one very small one. I'll explain why again in a moment. But it's just managed by the tax system. So it's a nice, simple, efficient way to manage both taxation and welfare. And what it will do, it provides support for anyone and everyone over the age of 18 who, whatever they're unemployed, they want more education, They might even want to retire. It provides for all of these people in a minimal but satisfactory way, and it's only those people with income below a prescribed number, whatever that number may be, who will receive it. So it's very efficient. It directly helps alleviate poverty in the most efficient way. Those are the advantages of reverse income tax. There's a lot of people who criticise reverse income tax without really understanding what it is. So let me mention some of what would be called the perceived disadvantages of reverse income tax. And I see all of these as short-term and temporary, whereas I do see all the advantages of reverse income tax as being long-term and sustainable. So what I'm going to mention here is nothing that damages the economy over the long term, but there's going to be some disruption because this would be a big change and need a bit of planning, because you'd have to reorganise the whole current tax system, which means you've got to have a lot of people out there just researching this, working the numbers out. How are we going to get this amount of tax through this system, because we're going to have to spend this amount of money. So there's research that needs to be done, and the whole system will need to be reorganised in a way that will disrupt, certainly. So getting used to a totally new tax and benefit system creates winners and losers. Child benefits will go, lots of benefits will go, but they will be substituted to those people who actually need them, because, as we all know, there are lots of people who receive child benefits who don't need them. And reverse income tax targets those people who really need something. The last thing you want to be doing is taking money away from rich people and then giving it back to the same rich people through child benefits or whatever it is. If you're going to do something like child benefits or free school meals, or as it was when I was a young lad, free milk when you were at school, it's better in political terms to do this for everybody, because that gets votes, not really the people who need it. So the people who need it don't really get focused upon as clearly as you could if you looked at incomes and directed incomes into their pockets and let them therefore choose after that how they spend that money. So there's going to be winners and losers in this, but it's still going to be much more efficient than the current system. And I suppose one of the biggest problems is it's going to create a significant rise in unemployment, certainly in the civil service, in all the welfare departments, because we're not going to need those anymore. So a lot of people are going to be unemployed as the result of this, as we shift to a different system, and we will have to take them out of what are essentially unproductive jobs that they're doing now, unnecessary jobs, and we're going to be relocating them, not immediately, over time, in other jobs. So it's the disruption, if you like, which is going to be the real cost of introducing reverse income tax, but the benefits of doing it far outweigh that, and we really need to think about doing this. Now let me explain to you how it works, and I'm just going to pick numbers out of a hat, because I require my undergraduates to, when they've completed their degrees, do their PhD on working all these numbers out for me, but it's not too difficult to do. So just let me explain to you with chosen numbers that may be absolutely the right numbers, but I don't know this because I haven't researched this in any depth. Suppose you take, and remember, I tax income, I'm not really worried about wealth. So suppose everyone is given a tax-free allowance of £20,000. So all that means is you can earn up to £20,000, you don't pay any tax. The first marginal rate of tax you pay is when you earn £1 more. So when you've earned £20,000 and one, you would then pay whatever the basic rate of tax is, 20p, 25p, 30p, whatever it is, you will start paying tax. So up to £20,000 earned in a year, pay no tax. Earn £20,000 and £1 extra, you pay 30p in tax. Now I've decided, I have no idea whether this is a great idea. Well, I can see why my students will think it's a great idea in a moment, because I've decided that each person needs a basic income of £9,000 a year. That's the basic income people need. It's a coincidence that this actually equates with the higher education student fees in the UK. As I say, a coincidence, but let's suppose that every individual over the age of 18 should have access to £9,000 as a basic income. Now, how do I deal with that, with a reverse income tax? Well, it's simple. I set a reverse income tax rate at 45%. Now, 45% is placed on all the income that you do not earn below £20,000. Which means that if you're 18, you go to university, you have no income at all, then HMRC, Her Majesty's Revenue and Customs, will provide you with 20,045 pence, which equals £9,000. So you will have £9,000. That's how it works. So you're in a situation where no income, you receive £9,000 with a reverse income tax of 45%. Simple as that. Now, one of the problems, oh, excuse me, backache. Oh. One of the problems that we have had in the past with the tax welfare system that we have got and that we've had for many years is what's called the potential for people to be caught in a poverty trap. And a poverty trap is where people who receive benefits receive those benefits and they're greater than the point at which people start paying basic tax. Now, it's slightly different now under the new scheme, which I'll mention at the end. But in the past, it was quite possible that a person who was receiving welfare benefits could go out and earn £1 and lose £1 of their benefits. Now, if they also earned £1, they'd pay the marginal rate of taxation, shall we say 20p, and lose £1. So for every £1 that they earned, right at the bottom end, they would lose £1.20. So effectively, that's an implied rate of tax of 120%. So you can see that no one caught in the poverty trap would have any incentive whatsoever to work, because they would be worse off if they worked. Which meant under those circumstances you would expect people who were receiving welfare benefits, who went out and got themselves a little job, to be asking for cash in hand. I can't declare this, don't tell anybody, I'll do this job, I'll do the garden for you, but I want it in cash so it can't be traced, because I'm not going to declare this. And we'd have some sympathy with that. Why would a person want to declare when they go out to work that they now owe the revenue collectors more money than they have earned? So it was a silly system that had developed, and it's a system which reverse income tax deals with. Reverse income tax removes this problem totally. There can never be a poverty trap. Remember, we've got now £20,000. If you earn more than that, you start paying tax. If you were a student, you could claim £9,000 reverse income tax. But suppose you were someone who got a job, you got a part-time job, and you earned £10,000. You've earned £10,000, but that's £10,000 below the threshold for taxation. So you could claim another 10,045p, and another 10,045p is £4,500. So you would receive an income at the end of the year of £14,500. And so you carry on. Add any number that you like to this. You will always be better off working than you would be receiving reverse income tax. Because there's always, if you like, the incentive to work, because you can never be worse off. And under that sort of system, we will be much less tolerant of people trying to cheat the system. We can tolerate someone caught in the poverty trap having to pay £1.20 for every pound they earn. We might say, yeah, I understand. But under this system, because people receive the additional income, they would be better off working, and the cheating side of things would be something that society would look differently at under reverse income tax. So let me say it again so that you're quite clear on what this means. Suppose you earned £15,000, then it was 5,045 pence that you could claim and add on to your £15,000, and you can keep adding on little bits right up to £20,000. Past £20,000, you start paying tax, contributing to the tax system. You can see it's a great sort of system to work with, isn't it? So what happens to welfare? Well, we're actually going to close down almost all of the welfare system and pension system. So you no longer need a pension system, because everyone who reaches a certain age, and they can choose the date at which they take their pension, will receive a state pension of £9,000, because that's assuming, of course, they've got no income. If they've got income from other sources and they're above £20,000, of course, they'll receive nothing at all, which again is much more efficient than the current system, isn't it? Because everyone achieves the right to have the state pension. So millionaires can receive the state pension in the same way as poor people can receive the state pension. I would quite like the poor people to receive the state pension, and those who don't need it don't receive it. This is exactly what will happen under this system. If you have, when you leave work or retire or are forced to retire, no income whatsoever, the state will provide you with £9,000. If you do have income above £20,000, you get nothing. So what's the welfare system left for? Now, in any civilized society, we do need to give special consideration to those people who are registered as physically and mentally unable to look after themselves, both as adults and as children of parents who are in need of support. So a welfare system should be there to help these people, which means that if we take everyone employed now in the welfare benefits system, we could probably reduce it by 95%, but there'd be a very small welfare system that would help people who are physically and mentally unable to look after themselves. That's what every civilized society should do. Now, that means we're looking after everybody, physically and mentally disabled. We are looking after everybody whose income is below £20,000, all the way down to people who have got no income whatsoever, who will automatically receive £9,000 a year. What a great system that one is, isn't it? I've explained it for years, and people go, yes, great system that. but it's never been thought about, never been introduced. Almost, well, everyone I talk to now, so let's say almost everyone, there's always someone who disagrees, isn't there? But almost everyone supports the idea of reverse or negative income tax. So it does beg the question, why has government never considered introducing this system or even looked at it in any detail? And I'm afraid to say the simple answer is there's too much resistance from those public servants who run the country, and then would find themselves unemployed or downgraded in importance if you replaced their welfare system with this welfare system. Its introduction would require, as I have already said, careful calculations, and there's bound to be hiccups on the way. But I've never found anyone who could actually give me an explanation of why it wouldn't be sustainable over the long term and much better than the current system, other than no, people are not able to look after themselves, and poor people are poor because they're unable to look after themselves, and they will need people to take money away from rich people, keep some themselves, and then pass it on to these people. That's the sort of system that we've always had, and that's the sort of system that works best. No, it isn't. Reverse income tax is a much better system than that. So I'm quite happy to support reverse income tax. There is a universal tax credit system available, and arguably the universal tax credit was a nod in the right direction, but it was kept sufficiently complicated to make sure that it required an army of civil servants to still manage it. That's about the best the civil service would want, or civil servants would want. That is to be important, and so it's not gone particularly well. There's a bit of a mess, but then government always mess things up, don't we? Don't we? Don't they? Sorry, not me. I mean, let's hope there are some government economists. I can't think there'll be many of them wanting to put public servants out of a job, but doctoral students working on all these numbers, doing their due diligence, and thinking about introducing a reverse income tax. It's something that well, Milton Friedman for many years, myself for many years have said it's a brilliant system, but we just never got round to considering it, and hopefully anyone listening to this will pass on the information and go, yeah, things are now not as good as they should be. This is one step towards efficiency and returning the country to a much sounder footing than the footing we will be on in a few years' time. By the way, this is the beginning of 2021. It's much better than the other suggestion which economists are making and politicians are thinking about, because it will get lots of votes. That is to have a universal basic income, because that doesn't work. That isn't efficient, because the universal basic income is actually paid to everyone. RIT isn't, reverse income tax isn't. It's only made available to those people who need it, those people whose income are below a certain level. So basic incomes, universal basic incomes, forget them. Reverse income tax provides a universal basic income to everyone who needs it. And that's a very small percentage of people. The rest of us, we just get on with our lives. So I hope you've enjoyed a little trip into the tax and welfare system. There are a lot more things that can be said about the tax system, but I do consider this to be the most important, and hope you have not only enjoyed this, but will think very carefully about pushing for reverse income tax. Thank you.